Alright, so I got quite a few messages from the guild, from some of you from the guild, and the most common questions that I received was how would I run dungeon effectively? Now that question is quite difficult for me to answer, simply because there is no, not just one answer, but there are many ways for me to answer because it depends on your group. It depends on the skill level, and it depends on how much you individually um, that you know about the dungeon itself. So I think that to answer that question, I would I'm gonna make this video that I will go over the some of the stuff, that very basic stuff for the dungeon itself, cover from the overview, and then after that I will move on to some of the next stuff, including the combat, my stack, effectiveness combat, and also how you can skip some of the mobs that are unnecessary to kill. So first video that we are going to have a look at the overview of the dungeon. Now this video is quite long, and I mean I haven't done this sort of video before, so please bear with me, and if I make any mistakes during the video, or if I forget to include anything, feel free to give me a suggestion or send me a message on YouTube and I'll have a look at it. So let's start with the Dungeon 101 overview, and we'll go through the dungeon itself in terms of the overview of the dungeon, like the introduction stuff, and then after that in the next video we'll move on to some of the combat stuff that I personally use and some of my teams also personally use as well to run dungeon effectively. Alright, so as some of you may know, but some of you who are completely new to the game, I mean like you just bought the game, and some of you who haven't played Guild Wars 2 before or Guild Wars 1 or anything like that at all. So let me just start with the mode of the dungeon. Now there are two modes in the game. The story mode, which is the tie-in story to your personal living story, and this one will be so let me put it this way. When you first created your character in the game, you start doing some of your personal story, right? So you go on around and you start finishing some of your stories, and then you level up. Now the dungeon itself, some of the dungeons, the story of that particular dungeon will be tied into your personal story. So when you start doing your personal living story, some of the stories in between, from say level 30 to level 40, there are some stories for some of the NPCs or some of the characters in the game that the dungeon story mode will explain in more detail of what happened from level 30 to level 40, and that will tie into your personal story. So I would say that if you are into what was it into the lore or the story of the Guild Wars 2 itself, so you may find this enjoyable doing story mode. Now the second one is what people usually do, is explorable mode. Now explorable mode, in the simplest definition that I can give you, is that it is a hard mode of the dungeon, and the reward for the explorable mode is way better than the story mode. And so in the next slide, which is this one, I'm going to explain to you what are the stories, I mean at the level requirement, and then after that I will explain to you why explorable mode is worth doing. Now there are 8 story modes, I mean like 8 story dungeons in the game, and plus one special one. Now this special one right here, which is Fractals of the Mist, and this one will be um, some of them tie into the personal living story, some of them tie into the living story that currently um, happening. So for this one I would leave this one for now, and I will explain it into a separate video why this one is special. So back to the dungeon, story dungeon. There are 8 of them, and the Ascalonian, which is the first entry level dungeon, which will be level 30 for the story mode, which is the minimum requirement that you can enter into the dungeon itself. Now level 35 is eligible for you to run the Explorer mode, but I would highly recommend you to be level 80 to run the Explorer mode, because you have more skills and more traits in your skill sets, and it makes it so much better for you to kill the mobs faster, and also more utilities for you to use in the dungeon itself. So I would highly recommend you to be level 80 to do the Explorer mode for effective run. Caduceus Manor, which is level 40, and Twilight Arbor, level 50. Sorrow's Embrace, 60. Citadel of Flame, 70. Honor of the Ways, 60. Crucible Eternity, 80. And Ara, which is one of the most difficult dungeons in the game, level 80 requirement. Now, there is another one that also very difficult to do. Actually, it's not really difficult in my opinion, but some you may find difficult, is the Twilight Arbor level 80 path. And in the game, it should be called the Athia Blade. I'm not sure if I write it correctly, but yeah, Athia Blade, or the Pirate path, or the Twilight Assault path, or what. There are 3 names for that, people that use intentionally. So if you hear or if you see somebody in the map chat saying, oh, they want to do Athia Blade, or they want to do Pirate Twilight for the Twilight Arbor dungeon, or the Twilight Assault, they mean the same thing. Alright, so moving on to the reward of the dungeon. Now for the story mode, the reward is not that worth doing, to be perfectly honest, because for the first time completion you get a rare equipment which is tied into that dungeon level. So if there is say Ascalonian Catacombs is level 30, you will get a rare equipment once you complete it, and 50 silver. You get some tokens, which is between this and the Explorer mode. Explorer mode gives you more token, and you get some sort of loots from the mobs and bosses. But in the Explorer mode, you get a fixed amount of gold depending on the length of the dungeon. The minimum gold that you will receive is 1 gold and 5 silvers, and the maximum that you can receive is 3 golds and 5 silvers. Now this 3 golds reward can only be you can only get it from running Ara. Yes, keep that in mind. You can only get 3 golds reward from running dungeon is from running the Ara dungeon. So keep that in mind. It's one of the most difficult dungeon, and it's one of the longest dungeon, which is why you get 3 golds in total. And you get a fixed 40 tokens of that specific dungeon. This is the token icon for that dungeon itself. And you get a high chance to get a better loot from mobs and bosses, so exotic, and some of the sigils and stuff like that. Fractals of the Mist reward, I will make another video for this dungeon because it is quite unique, so I will leave it for now, and I will come back and talk about it in another video. The token purpose is you can exchange the tokens for armor set, weapon set, legendary weapon material, if that is your thing. You need 500 tokens for each gift. Now the gift, you can use it to craft the legendary weapon. The runes, which is in the simplest definition that I can give you, is that it's gonna buff your armor up and it's gonna buff your attribute up. and I'll come back to that in a few slides later to show you uh, what are the benefits of the runes. You can salvage to get the materials that you can craft for some of the items later on. Now, Ascalonian Catacombs, you will receive the Ascalonian tier, uh, I mean a token. The token name is Ascalonian Tears, and you can receive it after completing one path of the dungeon. Now, the full set of the armor will cost you 1380 tokens or 1380 tokens in total. For the helm, for the head piece equipment, you need to exchange 180 Ascalonian Tears to get it. 210 for the shoulder. The chest is 330. Gloves is 180. Pants is 300. Shoes is 180. For the weapons, for the main hand weapon, you need to exchange 300 tokens each. For the offhand weapons, you can exchange it for 210 tokens for one of them, and obviously two-handed weapon you can exchange for 390. Now, for the runes, you can get well, it's already tied into the armor when you purchase it, which is superior rune of the monk. Now this one will give you a healing. If you equip two of them, it will give you the boon duration and so forth. And the attribute for the Ascalonian Catacombs full set armor is Power, Toughness, and Vitality, Rampager, Magi. And for the weapon one, you get the Sigil of Ghost Slaying. And this one you can find it on Guild Wars 2 wiki. Just Google it and it will come up to you. Now, there are, I should have included in this slide. Just give me 1 second. I should have included additional information in this. Now, there are 3 paths for this dungeon. Now, each path will give you 40 tokens, and you can only get the reward once a day. So let me repeat this one again. Once again, you have 3 paths for the dungeon, and each path will give you 40 tokens, but you can only do it once a day, so you cannot rush doing the dungeon itself to get a token. So if you do 3 paths for the dungeon, it will give you 120 tokens per day, and that means if you want to get this figure, you need to do at least 11 days to get this to get the full armor set. And for the weapons, it will take you more to complete. So keep that in mind, that if you are completely new to the dungeon, or you just bought the game and just reached level 80 and you want to get the dungeon armor itself, just keep that in mind, that it will take you about 2 weeks, approximately 2 weeks, for you to get the full set armor and the weapons itself. And the location for Ascalonian Catacombs, which is the entry level dungeon, will be right here. This one, dungeon Ascalonian Catacombs, right here. And Catechism. Did I spell it right? Yeah, should be. Catechism Manor is the level 40 story mode dungeon and level 45 minimum level that you can enter the dungeon itself. And you get the full set armor for exchanging 1380 tokens. and this is this rune that you're gonna receive when you buy the armor itself. And obviously this is the attributes and the sigil itself. Now I will keep on moving from this slide to the next one. So if you want to have a closer look at this, you can check out the source at Viewers 2 wiki, just Google it, or you can pause the video and have a look at it yourself. And the location for this Coedicus Manor dungeon will be in the human first map right here, Coedicus Manor. So this is your human hometown. You just have to locate it, go from here to here and here. And next one will be the Twilight Arbor. Now this set is more condition build. So you know, as you can see in here, the attribute itself is more toward the condition build. So it might not be a good idea if you are going for the berserker build. So as always, the location for this one will be at the Sylvari first map right here, dungeon Twilight Arbor. So Kesek Hill, Calderian Forest is located up here, right here. Oh, I should mention the Sigil of Dreams. The Nightmare Code is the mobs inside the dungeon itself, Twilight Arbor. Sigil of Justice, which is the human mobs inside the Coedicus Manor. Ghost Slaying, ghosts are the mobs inside the Ascalonian Catacombs. Sorrow's Embrace dungeon will be located in the at the where was it? Right here, Sorrow's Embrace. Break. Look at this map here, the Dread map clips. Go here, Dungeon Sorrow's Embrace. Level 60 for the story mode and level 65 minimum level for the explorable mode. Citadel of Flame. Now this is a very popular dungeon because it will take in an effective group it would take about 5 to 6 minutes for path 1, about 10 minutes for path 2. I would say so, about 10 to maybe 13 minutes for path 2. So it's a very popular dungeon because of the fast money in terms of the time that you spend and the money that you receive. Very popular, and you will receive at least, I mean, like the gold reward is at least about 2 gold and 10 silvers once you complete path 1 and path 2. Now path 3 is not desirable because it is long and is, you know, is if you're aiming for the title Dungeon Master, then you should aim for this path 3, complete the path 3. But if you just want to make some fast income, I mean a fast goal, I wouldn't advise you to run path 3. And so yeah, and the location for this is right up in the dungeon Citadel of Flame at the Fire Hut Rise. Oh, and there are 3 paths for this dungeon. For the Sorrow Embrace there are 3 paths as well. For the Twilight Arbor there are 3. One of them, the first, which is the forward path and the up path These two are level 45. No, 55, sorry, 55 minimum level for you to enter. The level 81 is quite long, and it was called, like I said earlier, Athia Blade, or it can call Pirate, or it can be called, what was it, Twilight Assault. So yeah, this is very long, and it would take about I can't remember how long it took me to finish this one, but I remember back in the day it was approximately about 1 hour for me to complete this, if I remember it correctly. It's been a long time since I last run this, because it's very long and it's not worth the time of doing it, so I wouldn't advise you to run it, uh, this dungeon, unless you want to have the dungeon master title. Otherwise I wouldn't advise you to run this. It's long, it's tedious, and uh, times waste a lot of time. Back to the story dungeon itself. Now we are moving on to the Honor of the Waves. Now the minimum level for you to enter the story mode is 76, and it is located at the Frostgore Sound right here. Honor of the Waves. And the explorable mode is level 80. And there are 3 parts for this dungeon itself. Crucible of Eternity. There are 3 parts for this dungeon, and it is located down in the right here. This map, what is this map called? Oh, I don't have it unlocked on my elemental list, but this is Mountain Maelstrom, if I remember that correctly, which is the one for the Crucible Eternity dungeon itself. And lastly, the Ara dungeon. The story mode will be the personal living story. Your personal living story final task is to kill Zaitan at the in the dungeon itself, in the story mode of this dungeon itself, and it is located right here, Runes of War, right here, Dungeon Ara. Now there will be 4 paths of the dungeon. 4 paths. Path 1, 2, 3. It is long. I wouldn't recommend you who if you are recently just get into dungeon to run this dungeon in explorable mode. Path 1 and 3, if you are comfortable with it, like if you run some of the dungeons before, if you're comfortable with it, then yeah, you can run path 1 to 3. But path 4, keep that in mind that path 4 would take you at least 3 hours. 3 hours to complete this. Even an effective group that I usually run with, it took us about 45 minutes to complete this one. So yeah, when the first time that I ran this dungeon, it took me about 5 hours. First time that I ran this path 4 explorable mode, it took me 5 hours. And then after that I started running with some random pack, just pick up groups, random people, just to help them out, and because some of them are my friends. So me and 2 other friends, like, we group together and we invite 2 other random people to run with us, and that run we ran with them, with 2 random people. It took us about 3 hours in total. And the last time that I did this with my dungeon frequenter, that's what I usually call them, like the dungeon runner that run the dungeon every day, so we call them dungeon frequenter. And for the dungeon frequenters, because they know what to do, like my stack, combo field, and stuff like that, and they know how to fight a certain boss and stuff like that, it took us about 45 minutes to finish this dungeon. and that's the last time that I done this. So yeah, keep that in mind that this is one of the hardest dungeon in the game. For the people like me, it's not that really difficult, but for some of you who are completely new to the game, I would say that it is quite difficult for you to do. Now keep that in mind that it is my personal opinion. Some of you might find that easy, uh, some of you might find difficult, but regardless whatever it is, in my opinion, this is still one of the most difficult dungeons for the people who are new to the game. So what I would advise you to do is run some other easy dungeon first before you start uh, before you start doing Ara Explorer mode. Alright, so that covered for the overview of the Dungeon 101 video, and I will just close the video for now, and I will be moving on to the second video, which I will be talking about the combat my stack and some of the trick that you can use to maximize your damage in the when you start running the dungeon itself. So I will see you in my second video.